Millions watched in silence as Jasmine Crockett leaned into her microphone and delivered the one sentence Elon Musk never expected to hear, one that made the world stop, blink, and whisper, "Did she really just say that?" The committee room froze. Even the cameras seemed to tighten their focus, as if the lenses themselves sensed that history was about to split open. Crockett didn't raise her voice. She didn't flinch. She simply spoke with the kind of precision that comes from a lifetime of knowing exactly when the truth is sharp enough to cut through power. Across the table, Musk shifted. For the first time all morning, the billionaire who built rockets to escape gravity looked unmoored, caught between disbelief and irritation. He opened his mouth to respond, but Crockett held up a single page, just one, steady, deliberate, and devastating. Gasps flickered through the room like sparks dancing across dry grass. Reporters lifted their cameras higher. Phones shot upward from the back rows. Someone whispered, "Oh, he's done." But then Crockett paused. She held the page in place, eyes fixed on Musk, and the silence that followed felt almost engineered. A pin-drop moment suspended between revelation and impact. The page contained the detail he feared most, but she didn't read it aloud. Not yet. She let the tension thicken, let the cameras zoom, let millions lean closer to their screens. Outside the chamber, social media detonated in real time. Clips of her last sentence hit timelines before she'd even finished speaking. Hashtags surged. Comment sections erupted into firestorms of disbelief, joy, outrage, and awe. No one knew what was on that page, but everyone felt the tremor of something seismic. And just before the reveal, Crockett lowered her hand and said, almost softly, "Let's start at the beginning." But the story behind how this moment exploded into national headlines is even more unbelievable. The reason this confrontation mattered was bigger than a hearing, bigger than a headline, bigger even than the clash between a billionaire and a congresswoman. It was about power, the kind that shapes narratives, influences elections, and decides who gets heard in a country still wrestling with its identity. Elon Musk had built more than companies. He had built an aura of invincibility. Rockets, cars, satellites, social platforms. Each one fed the myth that he stood above scrutiny, beyond accountability, untouchable by the rules that bound everyone else. He wasn't just a mogul. He was a symbol of unchecked influence, a man who could fire off a tweet and shift markets, ruin reputations, or tilt political winds. And Jasmine Crockett knew exactly what that meant. She'd watched as Musk inserted himself deeper into national debates, using his platforms to elevate fringe voices while mocking the very communities she represented. Every controversy, mass firings, sudden policy shifts, algorithmic manipulation, late-night tirades, felt like a reminder that he controlled the digital megaphone millions depended on. People whispered that confronting him was a political death sentence. Staffers murmured that you don't poke the empire. Yet the deeper the silence grew, the heavier Crockett felt the responsibility pressing against her ribs. She didn't posture or rehearse dramatic lines. Instead, she prepared quietly, sifting through documents, testimonies, timelines, seeking not a moment of spectacle but a moment of truth. She understood that this hearing wasn't just about Musk. It was about the communities who watched billionaires play with their futures like toys. It was about the immigrants who built the country he claimed to fix. It was about the young voters whose voices could be buried beneath misinformation with a single algorithmic tweak. As she stepped into the committee room that morning, the lights felt dimmer than usual, casting long shadows across polished wood and cold microphones. The air carried a low hum, advisors whispering, reporters adjusting their equipment, aides exchanging nervous glances. Everyone knew Musk was about to face rare scrutiny, and everyone knew he wasn't used to it. He walked in with the casual confidence of someone who believed he controlled not just the narrative, but the room itself. A faint smirk, a slow stride, a billionaire who'd spent years assuming he was the smartest person wherever he went. But Crockett sat already waiting, still and composed, hands folded neatly on the desk. There was no smirk on her face. No tremor. No fear. Only the kind of resolve that comes from knowing you aren't just speaking for yourself. You're speaking for millions who don't have seats in these rooms but deserve someone who does. The tension thickened as opening statements began. Musk's team whispered back and forth. Crockett's allies watched with quiet solidarity. The cameras clicked. Pens tapped. And somewhere in the room, someone muttered, "This is going to get messy." Because the truth was simple. Musk wasn't prepared for someone who couldn't be bought, bullied, or dazzled. He wasn't prepared for someone who'd done her homework. He wasn't prepared for dignity. But to understand why this moment shook Musk to his core, we must look at the man behind the empire. Elon Musk's rise was the kind of story America loved to romanticize. A visionary immigrant entrepreneur who spoke in grand predictions, built machines that defied gravity, and sold the dream that innovation could solve anything, from traffic to planetary survival. For years, he cultivated the persona of a maverick genius, the billionaire rebel who dared to challenge institutions. The public saw the polished interviews, the viral quotes, the bold promises of Mars colonies and clean energy revolutions. They saw a man who seemed to hold the future in one hand and the world's admiration in the other. But behind that gleaming narrative was a different Musk, one shaped as much by ego as by innovation. The deeper his empire expanded, the more control he demanded. At Tesla, employees whispered about abrupt firings delivered over text message, impossible deadlines enforced by fear, and sudden mood swings that reshaped entire departments overnight. At SpaceX, stories circulated of meetings where no one dared contradict him, not because he was always right, but because challenging him meant career suicide. Everywhere he went, the same pattern emerged: brilliance shadowed by volatility, vision tainted by a need to dominate. Then came Twitter, his ultimate megaphone. The moment Musk took the platform into his hands, he treated it less like a social network and more like a personal kingdom. Rules shifted on whims. Journalists were suspended for reporting on him. Satire accounts were banned, reinstated, then banned again. Entire teams were fired overnight. Content moderation became chaos. And in the middle of it all, Musk tweeted through the storm, posting memes while employees slept on office floors and misinformation spread unchecked. The man who once promised humanity a better future now seemed to enjoy watching the digital public square burn. His political meddling grew sharper with each passing month. He flirted with conspiracy theories, amplified voices known for bigotry, mocked vulnerable communities, and slid deeper into the culture wars he once pretended to rise above. Critics said he wasn't pushing free speech, he was pushing his speech. Supporters praised him as a renegade. Detractors warned that giving one man this much influence over global communication was a danger no democracy could ignore. Behind the scenes, cracks widened. Regulators began circling. Lawsuits multiplied. Investors whispered about instability. Engineers quietly left. Even longtime allies distanced themselves as his tone-deaf comments sparked international backlash. Every new controversy seemed to confirm the same uncomfortable truth. The line between Musk's genius and his recklessness was thinner than anyone wanted to admit. Yet to the outside world, Musk maintained the aura of someone untouchable, someone who believed he existed above accountability. His interviews grew more combative. His tweets more erratic. His public appearances took on a strange defensiveness, as though he felt the world finally pressing back against him. And that pressure only deepened his conviction that he alone understood the real truth, that he alone should shape public discourse, that he alone could not be questioned. This was the Musk who walked into the committee room on the day Jasmine Crockett confronted him, a man used to being praised, feared, or tolerated, but never challenged. He carried himself with the silent arrogance of someone certain the room would bend to his will. After all, for years it had. People deferred. Politicians hesitated. Media personalities tiptoed around his ego. He believed himself too big to fall, too powerful to corner, too beloved to embarrass. But what Musk didn't understand, what he couldn't understand, was that the strength he projected had slowly become a mask. And that mask was beginning to crack, revealing a man far more fragile than his myth. And Crockett, calm and unshaken, was about to strike precisely where that mask was weakest. Jasmine Crockett's story was not one built in boardrooms or on viral tweets. It was forged in communities often overlooked, in neighborhoods where justice was a promise too often broken, and in classrooms where her potential was questioned before she even spoke. From an early age, she learned that power was not given, it was earned, fought for, and carried responsibly. Her parents instilled in her a fierce sense of integrity, a belief that dignity was not a luxury but a right everyone deserved, and that silence in the face of wrongdoing was complicity. She carried those lessons into her education and early career, navigating institutions that were often indifferent to the voices of women, immigrants, and communities of color. Crockett's rise was marked by long nights poring over case files, standing in courtrooms where the stakes were the freedom and futures of everyday people. She became known for listening, not just hearing the words of her clients, but understanding their fears, their struggles, and their hopes. That ability to connect, to humanize complex problems, would later define her as a politician, a legislator, and ultimately, as a hero in the eyes of a public that craved authenticity. By the time she stepped onto the national stage to confront Elon Musk, Crockett had already earned the respect of colleagues, activists, and constituents alike. She was seen as a principled fighter, the type of leader who could challenge entrenched power without losing sight of the communities she represented. Her work in public service had been relentless, marked by a quiet, unyielding dedication to fairness, accountability, and transparency. People didn't follow her because she sought attention. They followed her because she embodied the values they longed to see reflected in leadership: courage, intelligence, empathy, and unwavering moral clarity. Crockett's identity was central to her power. As a woman of color, she understood the added scrutiny, the subtle barriers, the moments where voices like hers were deliberately marginalized. Yet, instead of letting these obstacles define her, she used them as fuel. Every dismissal, every doubt cast by those who underestimated her, became a brick in the foundation of her resilience. She learned to anticipate resistance, to navigate tension, and to turn challenges into opportunities to demonstrate both competence and character. These lessons, accumulated over years of hard-fought battles, gave her an edge few could rival, and none could underestimate. Her preparation for the showdown with Musk was rooted in this lived experience. While the billionaire relied on his wealth, his media influence, and his cultivated aura of invincibility, Crockett relied on knowledge, strategy, and the steady power of truth. She knew the room, the stakes, and the audience, all of them watching not just the exchange of words, but the collision of principle versus arrogance. Every pause, every carefully chosen phrase, was shaped by decades of observing, learning, and acting with precision. Crockett was not seeking fame. She was seeking justice. She was not seeking applause. She was seeking accountability. And she was not seeking a moment in the spotlight. She was prepared to create one, exactly when it mattered most. The stage was set. The billionaire, untouchable in public perception, was about to encounter a force he had never fully anticipated. A woman whose strength came not from wealth, but from truth, integrity, and an unwavering commitment to the people she served. Her past struggles had forged her into someone capable of confronting power directly, and today, that preparation would meet its test. The room had settled into a brittle silence, the kind that prickled the skin and made every whispered word feel amplified. Elon Musk leaned back in his chair, the faint curve of a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. He began dismissively, almost conversationally, joking about the questions he claimed were overblown or trivial. His tone carried the weight of someone accustomed to being untouchable, someone who believed charm and wealth could override accountability. He smirked at journalists, gestured toward committee members as if reminding them who controlled the conversation, and laughed lightly when a minor protest erupted in the back rows. But Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. Her composure was absolute. Every gesture measured, every syllable deliberate. She did not interrupt. She did not react emotionally. Instead, she leaned forward, eyes sharp, voice steady, precise, slicing through Musk's casual arrogance with the authority of someone whose preparation left no room for misstep. She began addressing the specific controversies, the missteps, the contradictions, all with a clarity that made even his closest advisors glance nervously at one another. Each fact she presented landed like a hammer strike against the polished veneer of Musk's public persona. The tension escalated visibly. Musk's usual ease faltered, an eyebrow raised here, a hand twitching there. He tried to reclaim control, speaking faster, cracking jokes that landed hollowly, attempting to dominate with anecdotes and distractions. But Crockett matched him step for step, her calm intensity only magnifying the contrast. The more he rattled, the steadier she appeared, as if the room itself bent toward her resolve. The audience felt it, too, the low hum of anticipation, the muffled gasps, the subtle leaning forward of committee members who realized they were witnessing not a routine hearing, but a battle of wills. Slow-motion beats marked the escalation. Musk paused mid-sentence, searching for the next clever deflection. Crockett let silence linger, letting the weight of each accusation settle in the air. Cameras clicked. Phones recorded. Reporters exchanged quick glances, sensing the tipping point approaching. Musk's jokes grew sharper but less effective, a brittle attempt to distract from the growing scrutiny. Every word Crockett delivered carried the gravity of preparation, the authority of principle, and the inevitability of accountability. And then, in a moment that seemed small yet seismic, Musk made his first real mistake. He underestimated her readiness, misjudged her ability to turn his own contradictions against him. A slip of confidence, a half-finished rebuttal, a fleeting look of frustration. Enough for the audience to catch it, enough for Crockett to note it, enough for the tension to snap like a drawn bowstring. In that heartbeat, the balance shifted. The billionaire's armor began to show cracks, and the room, once a stage for his dominance, started to tilt toward truth. The first clear advantage had been seized, and when Crockett struck next, it would leave no room for doubt. Crockett took a deep breath and let it out slowly, the kind of deliberate pause that made the room hold its collective breath. She reached for the first of several documents laid neatly before her, sliding it forward with the precision of someone who knew exactly when to strike. The cameras shifted, zooming in, capturing the subtle tension in her eyes, the faint crease of concentration on her forehead. Musk shifted as well, leaning back with a confidence that still clung faintly, but now carried the slightest tremor of uncertainty. She began calmly, methodically outlining the discrepancies, the contradictions, the decisions that had directly impacted millions, workers, communities, regulators, the very public that had celebrated his genius. Every word was measured, every sentence structured to land with maximum clarity and impact. She didn't shout. She didn't gesture wildly. She let the facts speak for themselves, and in their weight, they did more damage than any raised voice ever could. The first pause came mid-sentence, a quiet breath that allowed the gravity of the statement to settle. Musk opened his mouth, perhaps to interrupt, perhaps to recover control, but Crockett's gaze pinned him in place. Her next words cut sharper, pointing to financial inconsistencies, sudden executive firings, mismanaged platform decisions, and tweets that had caused measurable harm to both markets and reputations. The room went silent again. Advisors leaned closer, whispering, some shaking their heads subtly. Musk's hand twitched against the table, a small but telling sign of his unraveling composure. Crockett clicked to a screen, projecting charts, emails, and highlighted statements, each visual reinforcing the narrative she was weaving. Gasps fluttered around the room. Journalists scribbled frantically, microphones captured every deliberate inflection, and even the cameramen seemed to instinctively slow their pans, framing the moment as if knowing they were witnessing history. The billionaire's carefully curated aura began to falter. His eyes flickered, darting from screen to screen, from advisor to advisor, searching for guidance, for reassurance, for some sign that this exposure could be contained, but there was none. Each pause Crockett took amplified the tension. Each page she presented made Musk smaller in the room's collective perception. She did not need theatrics. The silence itself was her ally. She let the facts accumulate, stacking evidence like bricks, until the foundation of his confidence started to crumble. Musk's jaw tightened. He leaned forward once, then back again, a subtle dance of disbelief. His advisors exchanged anxious glances. One whispered urgently, another mouthed words silently, a flurry of panic hidden beneath corporate poise. Then came the final, defining blow. Crockett's voice remained calm, but each word hit with the weight of inevitability. She recounted, clearly and unflinchingly, the exact moment in which Musk's actions had crossed the line, the decision, the statement, the omission that no spin could excuse. The room seemed to shrink around them. Cameras focused sharply on Musk's face, now visibly rigid, pupils slightly dilated, the arrogance that had carried him so far visibly cracking. The reporter's notebook scratched furiously, the audience's whispers grew louder, a low hum of awe and disbelief. And finally, after letting the full weight of the evidence settle, Crockett leaned in slightly, her voice soft but unstoppable, and delivered the line that would echo across news feeds, headlines, and social media like, "Power does not make you untouchable. Truth does." The room fell into a stunned silence. Musk's smirk had vanished entirely, replaced by a brief, involuntary tightening of his lips. Advisors slumped subtly in their chairs, the tension in the room still vibrating from the impact of her words. Every camera angle caught the faint, almost imperceptible shift in the atmosphere. The billionaire's armor had been pierced, and the hero had struck with calm, relentless precision. Crockett did not raise her voice. She did not celebrate. She simply looked across the table, her presence enough to fill the space, and waited. The evidence had been delivered, the message undeniable, and the world, already watching, would soon feel the ripple of this exposure in ways Musk could not control. And outside, social media exploded. Clips went viral in seconds, analysts debated, hashtags surged, and millions realized that someone had finally stood up to power with courage, clarity, and truth. The moment Crockett delivered her final words, the outside world ignited. Within seconds, phones buzzed across the country, screens lit up with clips of her calm, precise dismantling of Musk's narrative. Hashtags like #TruthOverPower, #CrockettExposes, and #Elon Unmasked surged into trending lists, each one a digital echo of the stunned committee room. Millions of viewers watched, replayed, and shared the footage, the impact rippling across timelines with relentless speed. Celebrities weighed in. Activists celebrated. Journalists dissected every pause, every page, every carefully chosen word. Analysts on news panels replayed clips in slow motion, pointing out the subtle but devastating cracks in Musk's composure. Memes spread like wildfire, juxtaposing his smirk with Crockett's unwavering gaze, highlighting the contrast between arrogance and dignity. Social media feeds became battlegrounds of discussion, debate, and validation, as ordinary people felt for the first time that someone in power truly represented them. Fans praised Crockett for standing firm. "Finally, someone speaks for us," one comment read. "She didn't just expose him, she exposed what we've all been feeling," said another. Across threads and forums, people shared personal stories of frustration and marginalization, finding resonance in her courage. She became more than a politician. She became a symbol, a voice for communities that often felt invisible, dismissed, or ignored. Meanwhile, Musk's influence over digital spaces faltered. The very networks he had used to dominate public discourse were now amplifying his vulnerability. Headlines questioned his credibility, dissected his decisions, and debated whether his untouchable status had finally ended. Even his most loyal supporters couldn't ignore the visible cracks, the unflinching evidence, or the clarity of Crockett's message. Momentum shifted. The public conversation no longer centered on Musk's empire or wealth, it centered on accountability, integrity, and the power of truth. People felt seen, heard, represented. And as hashtags climbed, clips went viral, and analysts continued to debate the fallout, one undeniable fact emerged: the narrative had changed. The hero had struck, and the world had noticed. The stage was set for a reckoning, and the question on everyone's mind was no longer whether Musk would respond, but how the empire he built would withstand the wave Crockett had unleashed. In the quiet that followed the storm, Jasmine Crockett's presence remained unshaken. She did not gloat. She did not preen. Instead, she allowed the moment to speak for itself, transforming a high-stakes confrontation into a lesson that resonated far beyond the committee room. The cameras captured her calm, measured demeanor, a stark contrast to Musk's tense, retreating posture. And in that contrast, the lesson was clear: dignity outweighs arrogance, truth outlasts wealth, and standing firm matters more than standing tall in the eyes of the powerful. Crockett reframed the exposure not as a personal victory, but as a testament to principle. She spoke of accountability, fairness, and the responsibility leaders bear to those they serve. Her words echoed in the minds of millions watching. Standing up to power is not defiance for its own sake. It is a patriotic act, a defense of the values that form the foundation of society. The applause, the viral clips, and the trending hashtags were not signs of personal triumph. They were reflections of the public recognizing justice when it was delivered. She reminded the audience that representation is not symbolic, it is transformative. Every community, every marginalized voice, every citizen who has felt ignored or dismissed could see themselves in her courage. Crockett's calm strength communicated that real power is not measured by wealth, social reach, or fear, but by moral clarity, preparation, and the willingness to act when others hesitate. The billionaire across from her, once untouchable, now appeared humbled, a subtle acknowledgement of the authority wielded not through privilege, but through integrity. Her message carried an emotional, uplifting weight. Progress is possible when courage meets preparation, when truth confronts unchecked influence. Crockett did not need to raise her voice. The resonance of her deeds, the precision of her evidence, and the unflinching calm of her demeanor conveyed more power than any confrontation could alone. For millions, the moment crystallized into inspiration. It became a reminder that ordinary citizens, armed with conviction and diligence, could challenge even the most seemingly untouchable figures. That when righteousness is paired with courage, the world notices, and change becomes inevitable. And as the room slowly emptied, cameras still rolling, and hashtags continued to climb, one truth was undeniable. In the collision of power and principle, it was the hero's quiet strength that would be remembered long after the headlines faded. The story that began with a single, shocking sentence had rippled far beyond the walls of the committee room. Millions had watched Jasmine Crockett expose Elon Musk not through theatrics, but through truth, preparation, and unwavering courage. What started as a confrontation had become a lesson in dignity, accountability, and the power of standing firm against unchecked influence. This is more than a video. It's a reminder that courage is contagious, that integrity matters, and that speaking truth to power can shift narratives, inspire communities, and change the course of conversation. Crockett's calm authority and unflinching commitment to principle showed that one person, prepared and determined, can make even the most untouchable figures accountable. If you believe in truth over arrogance, justice over wealth, and representation over silence, join the movement. Share this story so more people see what standing up to power really looks like. Comment, engage, and let your voice echo alongside hers. Because change doesn't happen in isolation, it happens when communities notice, amplify, and demand accountability. And as the cameras finally dimmed, and the world absorbed what had just unfolded, one truth remained undeniable. Courage, when paired with conviction, will always outlast power.